Serious, what's the creepiest/scariest thing you've seen but no one believes you? Ghost story time. I was living with a few of my friends a year and a half ago, and we're all pretty religious, at least two of us work in religion. We were talking about how we didn't believe in ghosts or demons, at least in the sense that we couldn't see them if they were real. We started talking about how if we saw one it would change our perspective entirely. I said out loud, if something is here I wish it would just show us. 2 nights later I'm sound asleep and have the most vivid, brutal nightmare I've ever had. Long story short, I was in my childhood house, we were getting robbed, and the robber shot my father, only it was me, I was the robber. My father and I had a very strained relationship and the detail of the shooting woke me up in tears. I mean, I was sobbing. I looked at the foot of my bed and saw a man sitting on his heels staring at me. It looked like he was 80 years old but never hit puberty, that's as best I can describe it. His face looked kind but his eyes looked so wicked it struck terror into my soul. He almost looked curious, but morbidly so. He was wearing clothes that looked like he was a newspaper salesman from 1890s New York. I only saw him for a split second and he was gone. The wild thing is I got all of that detail in just a split second, like he wanted me to remember him. Here's the crazy part. So I was spooked to crap, right? I went into our living room and watched YouTube and some Twitch streams for a bit until I convinced myself I was just half asleep and still spooked. I lay back in bed and the moment my head hits the pillow my roommate sits straight up in bed, still asleep, points at the foot of my bed and says, "my name, who is that?" I lost my goddamn mind. I literally drove home at 3 a.m. and told my parents through tears I wanted to stay home until summer. I stayed at home for a week or so and then went back. My roommate started having regular night terrors after that, but we moved soon after. I've never been so scared in all of my life. When I was around 9 or 10, this guy who looked about 40, just kept being in every single public place I was in. With my parents or not, he was there. At the store? Yes, he was there, bought everything me and my family bought. In school? Yes, he was staring at me on the other side of the school gate. Out in the city? Yes, following me in the streets. I told my parents so many times and they just ignored me and said I need to stop believing everything my brother says. Since my brother was really into creepy stuff at the time, he was 14, one day this guy just disappeared. The next thing I knew was that one of my friends kept seeing the guy everywhere. She many times pointed that the guy was outside the school gate watching her. I never saw him on the other side of the gate. Then she told me the guy disappeared after a few weeks. Then this other kid started telling everyone about the guy following him. About 7 months passed and I moved to another town. Still gives me creeps. Edit. For the people asking what he looked like, he was a gingerhead, not really good looking, skeptical, and that's all I remember. About a decade ago, I was helping my sister and her husband move into their new apartment. It was in a far-off city, so I couldn't exactly drive home right after we were done, and their place was also pretty cramped. I decided to spend the weekend at her friend's, who I'll call Mary, house for my bus back home on Monday. Now, Mary is a widow. Keep that in my mind. When I first got to Mary's house, I was immediately hit by how unwelcoming the place felt. She was really nice, but the house just felt angry, as if I was an intruder. The building was also ice cold despite it being summer and there being no AC. It was off-putting to say the least, but I just chalked it up to nerves. Mary starts to show me around the house, but a feeling of profound unease begins to steadily creep up on me, starting right in my gut. Something is seriously off about this place, but I don't know what exactly. One room was her husband's study. It looked completely untouched since what I was guessing was the time of his death. Files, books, computer and keyboard, pens and pencils, and even a coffee mug. All of it was covered in some serious dust. The room didn't look exactly ominous, but it was certainly bizarre. She finally leads me to the guest room and I start to get ready to turn in. It's about 11 p.m. I leave the one luggage bag I brought on the floor, change into my pajamas, lay in bed and try to get to sleep. A few hours later at about 1 or 1:30, I wake up to what sounds like footsteps. I don't worry too much about it, thinking it's probably Mary on her way to the bathroom or something. Then something hits me like a brick. These footsteps are far too deep and far too loud to belong to Mary. They sound like the footsteps of a bigger guy. Now, I'm sweating bullets, but all I can really do is stay still and try to go back to sleep. So I do. I wake up again at about 3 or 3:30. Now, it felt like someone or something was pinning the covers from below the bed so that I couldn't move. I'm utterly terrified and paralyzed in fear. I manage to get the covers off and then the bed starts to violently shake. I grab my phone and ducking take off. I hustle down the stairs in my PJs and call a taxi to get to a hotel since I'm way too spooked to stay any longer. Once I get off the phone, I quickly go back into the house to get my stuff from the guest room. I will never forget what I saw next. As I open the door to my room, to my complete and utter horror, I see that my luggage has been placed on my bed, opened, and the contents have been completely strewn about. I practically crap a brick, scramble to get my stuff into my bag, and sprint out of the house. I haven't been over at Mary's house since. No one ever believes me when I tell them this except the few people that are involved. My dad thinks we are just too imaginative even though my mom and I will tell the exact same stories at different times, never having talked to each other, but anyway, here's what I have to contribute. It's a copy and paste, by the way. I've told this story on Reddit before. My story starts when I was roughly 8. My parents bought an old farmhouse that's over 100 years old. We found newspaper clippings in the wall when they renovated it from 1864. I had 2 brothers at the time and we were all outside playing and they had a tendency to pick on me, so I decided I was done putting up with it and went in the house to tattle, as year-olds do. I yelled several times for my mom and finally got back. "What is it there?" Not seeing her, I yell, "Where are you?" Again I hear a voice, "I'm over here there." I don't see her and call out again. This repeats about 4 times and as I get closer and the voice gets louder. I passed by a window and glanced out to see my mom and dad out in the distance working on a tractor. My heart jumps into my throat and I book it outside. My brothers are exactly where they were when I went in, so I know it's not one of them messing with me. Throughout the years I hear voices and TVs and strange noises constantly throughout the house, but just assume I'm hearing things move up a bit to me being 17. Parents left town for a few days and I had some friends come over. Night starts off normal, we play some video games and all is well. 2 of my friends need to use the bathroom, so one goes downstairs and one stays upstairs since there's 2 bathrooms in the house. First friend comes back from the bathroom and says, yes, really funny guys, to the 3 of us that are in the room. We have no idea what he talking about. He said banging on the door and making weird sounds while I'm taking a piss, so funny. We are all genuinely confused as we haven't moved. He doesn't believe us but sits down and rejoins the group. Now the second friend comes back from downstairs and has a similar complaint. He says we were bouncing a ball, shuffling things around, laughing outside the door and heard us run off when the toilet flushed. We again are confused, especially since there weren't enough of us to mess with both of them at the same time. Conversation kind of drops but neither seem convinced we did nothing. A couple hours go by and for some reason the conversation comes up again. We deny it, they don't believe it. Eventually that turns into jokes about ghosts and how we disturbed them when the house was remodeled. I was about 13 when we started remodeling. Jokes continue and someone said, come on now, you can't really believe that ghosts exist? And everyone is like, nah, they probably don't. On the other side of the room is a single fold closet door, and right as we said that, this door explodes open so violently that the folds slam together and bounce almost back shut. We immediately end that conversation, flip every light in the house on, and no one dared to touch that door. The next day I wanted to make sure something didn't fall. But as I open the door there is nothing close to the door, nothing big enough that even could have fallen to slam that door open. Move forward to me being 20 and telling my mom of the weird things that I witnessed. She tells me, I know there's at least a family of 3 that I know of. 2 little boys, one always has a bouncing ball and the other giggles a lot, and an old man. I hadn't even gotten to that part in my story. When I was 3, we were picking up my grandparents for a Sunday drive. I was sitting in the back seat on the passenger side. My grandfather was sitting in front of me. Suddenly he keeled over, dead of a massive stroke. As they hustled my little sister and me out of the car and into my grandparents' store, I happened to look over my shoulder and plainly saw Grandpa walking down the street with 2 men. Both were dressed in suits, which made it all the more incongruous that Grandpa was wearing the same gray sweater and peaked hat he'd been wearing a moment before in the car. There was nothing particularly creepy about the experience, except that I wouldn't accept that Grandpa was dead because, after all, I'd just seen him walking down the street. Naturally, this didn't go over very well. But I loved my grandpa, I didn't want him to be dead, and I knew what I had seen. When our family doctor arrived to pronounce Grandpa dead, my mother asked me if I would take his word for it. We had a very good, trusting relationship with our doctor, so I said that I would. The doctor assured me that my grandfather had in fact died. But he was the only grown-up who didn't treat me like I was crazy. He listened respectfully as I told him what I had seen, and he suggested that maybe the men in the suits were angels. This seemed reasonable. Problem solved. But to this day I can still see Grandpa walking down the street with those 2 men. And no matter what my parents tried to tell me, it wasn't just a guy who looked like Grandpa coincidentally wearing exactly the same clothes he'd been wearing in the car. It was him. I had a similar experience. Not with death, anyway. For years there was a picture of a family sitting on the table in my grandma's house. The picture would be taken down every now and then and a new portrait going up. It was a portrait of some extended cousins, I don't know their names. One day my mom and I were in a grocery store and I spotted that family. I pointed them out to my mom, who had no clue who I was about. They weren't cousins. She had no idea who they were. I told her they were in a picture on Grandma's table. She said there never was a picture on that table. Later, that same day we had to go to Grandma's, to drop something off. When we got there, I went to the table. And the picture was gone. It was there at least a week prior. I remember that picture. When Mom went to the bathroom, I asked Grandma about the picture and even she had no idea what I was talking about. To this day, to this very day, this mystery still bugs me. When I was a kid, I used to stay at my grandparents' house a lot. They've had that house for as long as my mom has been alive, possibly even longer. All I know is that the history of the property is still unknown to this day. Anyways, I used to stay in my mom's old childhood room. It was called the Purple Room due to the purple carpet and the lavender wallpaper. It was a pretty big room with a queen-sized bed in the middle, and a humongous window right next to it. During the summer I would frequently stay at that house and spend a lot of time in that room. One night, I vividly remember waking up late at night, probably 1 or 2 in the morning, and seeing a puppet show outside my window. I wish I was making this up. They were hand/sock puppets and it looked like it was only performed by 1 or 2 people. It was only a shadow of this performance, which threw me off, so of course I assumed I was still a little tired and totally out of it and imagining the whole thing. I decided to brush it off my shoulder and ignore it. Oh man, do I regret that. As soon as I turned over on my right side, there in the doorway was a large black figure. It was pitch black out in the hallway, but I could clearly see a figure standing there. My stomach sank and my heart started beating quickly. I was wide awake now. I blinked a few times and I swear every time I did, it got a little bit closer. When it got arm's length away from me, that's when I felt my heart stop beating completely and my body turning cold. I swear I could see my breath because of how cold it is. I was able to muster up a scream that woke up both of my grandparents and brother from their deep slumber. My grandma was the first one to come into my room, but as soon as she flicked the lights on, it was gone. Never to be seen again. I was sobbing and trying to tell her what I saw, but she just kept stroking my hair and saying I was just having a bad dream. I know that wasn't a dream and what I saw was real. I also believe that this thing that I saw as a child has followed me when I moved to a different state. I was about 6 or 7 when this happened and I'm 16 now. To this day, no one believes me. Alright. So this one comes with a little backstory. Gonna be sort long, so strap in. Mobile blah blah. I worked at a YMCA summer camp in Colorado. Cool spot, really secluded, no cell service or Wi-Fi. It backed up to some NFS land that we had permits to use. I digress. Before this was a summer camp for kids, it was a secluded farm/ranch owned by this family, the Bandauers, who had been living on it and running it for decades. Time frame we are talking about is circa 1890. I don't remember exactly. Anyway, this family would have these elaborate parties and other people from Denver and Boulder and the like would come and dance and get crap-faced. They had a dance hall on the property and this is where they would host parties. Side note, the original building is still on property and in use for staff and campers. So one of the older boys in the Bandauer family took a liking to a certain Denver girl named Mary Jenkins. She frequently visited during the dance parties and ended up getting engaged to the Bandauer boy. At one point they were having a little pre-wedding celebration and Mary was up visiting them for a month-long period. One day during her visit, Mary and her husband-to-be were taking some wedding photos. About a half-mile from camp proper, the dance hall area, there's this awesome canyon with walls maybe 400 feet high. On one particular wall there is this really cool land bridge/arch in the rock. So they were up on this rock bridge thing and suddenly Mary Jenkins falls off and plummets to the bottom of the wall. She wasn't dead upon impact but was horribly mangled. Her groom-to-be and some others who were there carried her body back to the ranch house, now camp office, where she died. Now, there is some speculation whether or not Mary actually fell off of the arch. Some people think that she was pushed off the rock by her fiancé. She had a large dowry and I believe back in the day, that was an official agreement that was guaranteed money. So after she died the dowry was given to the Bandauer boy, and he married one of Mary Jenkins' best friends like a couple months later. So, speculative death with money and backstabbing. Perfect concoction for paranormal activity. Fast forward to modern day YMCA camp. I have had 3 very specific encounters with a spirit that I, and everyone else at camp, believe is Mary Jenkins. I know others who have had encounters as well, but I will only tell you guys about mine, otherwise I'll be typing all night. Encounter 1. I and my girlfriend at the time were both working at camp. It was the weekend, so no one was there, but since we lived there at the time, we decided to go on a hike and come back to relax. We came back to camp and it is empty. No cars, nothing. Even our director, who lives there year-round, was gone. Taking advantage of our privacy, we decided to jump in the shower together in an empty cabin. At one point during our shower, there is a very distinct knock on the door of the bathroom. 3 or 4 knocks. We both look at each other confused, knowing we were the only ones there. Maybe someone came back? We figured it was probably our boss or something. I step out with a towel and open the door. No one. Confused and now a little creeped out, middle of the woods, I hopped back in the shower. Finishing up and there was another ducking knock on the door. At this point I am crapping my pants. Was creeped out the rest of the night, but nothing else happened. Encounter 2, I was off work and I was watching a movie in my personal cabin. My personal cabin just so happened to be the original home of the Bandauer family. It was busted and rickety, but hey, it was standing, had a bed, and a fridge. One night I went to sleep watching a movie. My computer was probably half battery life. Hopefully just enough to finish the movie. If not, my computer would go into sleep mode and essentially shut down. I fell asleep anyway, so whatever. At about 3 a.m. my computer roars to life. The movie I had put in earlier in the night starts playing on its own from the beginning. This is usually something that needs to be manually activated by clicking or prompting a program, etc. Additionally, my computer was at full battery. Some weird electronic thing going on. I shut that crap down and had a very uneasy sleep. Encounter 3, was in the dining hall. The old dance hall was converted into the mess hall with kitchen, etc. I was standing in the kitchen with a co-worker cleaning up from breakfast. All of the sudden, our dishwasher started a cycle on its own. Just started running. Creepy as duck. My coworker noticed it too and was freaked as well. Additionally, there are lights on in cabins at night when no one has been in them, and random doors to cabins open or locked. Just super weird crap. I don't think Mary Jenkins is a bad ghost. She doesn't want to hurt anyone, she just wants you to know that she is there. But yeah, it's definitely haunted. I also didn't believe in paranormal before working there. I also have a legit newspaper article about her death in the canyon from 1890. I will try to post a pic of it. Only my mom ever believed me about this. Unfortunately, she is no longer alive, so I cannot ask her for any more details than what I have been told while growing up. My dad just never wants to talk about what happened. I used to live in this rented house near an appliance store from birth up until I was 6 years old. I am 24 now and out of the military, if that tells you how long ago this was. Since it was a small house and I was the younger sibling, and my dad worked nights, I ended up sleeping in my parents' room until we moved out. It should be noted that one side of my bed was against a wall, and the other facing the doorway. I remember having this Cookie Monster plush that I was obsessed with and would never go to sleep without it. If my mom ever tucked me in without it, I would throw a tantrum until I had my best friend. Things started to change when I was about to turn 4 though. My mom would wake up and notice I would be sleeping without the plush and that it would be under my bed. Not thinking much of it, she would just put it back in my bed and let me continue sleeping. This kept going on for a couple of weeks until my mom finally decided to ask me about why Cookie Monster would always be under my bed when she would wake up. I remember saying something along the lines of, "He is my friend, he talks to me and likes to walk around at night," or something of that matter. From my perspective, I knew I was talking to Cookie Monster because I could see his eyes. You know how he has those big white eyes that stick out. He would talk to me at night and help me go back to sleep when I was scared. My mom played it off as my overactive child's imagination, but it slowly was about to get worse. Over the course of the next couple of months I would have night terrors. No, not simple nightmares. I am talking about full-blown night terrors, so bad to the point I would stiffen up and do nothing but scream as my mom tried to rock me back to sleep. This went on for almost every single night. They were so scarring on younger me that to this day I remember what they were about. I would be laying in bed at night when my Cookie Monster plush would came to life, drag me out of my bed, and pull me under it to eat me. Crap, I never stopped getting these dreams until I was 14. That is how scarring they were. About a year from moving out of the house and into a better place, my mom would learn the truth behind the whole ordeal. She woke up to some noises one night and heard me out in the living room talking to Cookie Monster. Now you might expecting that I am going to say she saw me talking to the plush, but you are wrong. You might expect me to say that I was laying in my bed and only the plush was out in the other room, but you are wrong. But reality is much, much scarier than any fictional story. What she saw instead is much worse than any paranormal activity crap you could ever see in any movie theater, for instead of a possessed doll, she saw me standing there, talking to the dark. My mom instinctively turned on the light, and as soon as she did, two old guys went running out of the now wide open front door. The only thing I remember from that night was my mom holding on to me for dear life as my dad and the police rushed to the house. The thing that scares me to this day is not the fact that I was talking to two random strangers that night. What scares me to this day is that I was talking to these people for months without knowing it. I was talking to the people who were constantly breaking into my house every night. That they were breaking in for months without kidnapping me, or stealing anything from us. What scares me to this day is that I still have no idea what they ever planned to do.